With a single swipe on her phone, Jasmine Taylor silenced the entire first-class lounge. The airline CEO's face drained of color as stock values plummeted on live TV behind him. Nobody suspected this economy passenger owned half the company's shares, until now. Before we dive into this powerful story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever witnessed or experienced discrimination while traveling. The airline industry is about to get a wake-up call they never saw coming. The story of Jasmine Taylor began 34 years ago in the small town of Macon, Georgia. Born to a high school math teacher and a postal worker, nothing about her childhood suggested she would one day become one of the most successful black entrepreneurs in America. But behind her warm smile and quiet demeanor lay a brilliant mind and an unshakable determination. As a child, Jasmine showed an extraordinary aptitude for mathematics and computer science. While other kids played outside, she would disassemble old computers her father brought home from yard sales, learning their inner workings through pure curiosity and persistence. By age 13, she had taught herself 3 programming languages and built a rudimentary firewall system that her school district eventually implemented. "My parents couldn't afford fancy computer camps or special programs," Jasmine would later tell Forbes magazine. "But they gave me something more valuable. They never once told me there were things I couldn't do because of who I was." That foundation carried her through Georgia Tech, where she graduated at the top of her class despite being one of only 4 black women in her computer science program. Her professors recognized her talent, but the tech industry proved less welcoming. During her first internship at a major tech firm, colleagues regularly mistook her for a secretary or janitorial staff despite her clearly displayed credentials. "I'd walk into meetings with my white male colleagues, and people would ask me to fetch coffee," she once recalled. "I started bringing my own just to avoid the conversation." After 5 years working at established cybersecurity companies where her ideas were often overlooked or appropriated by others, Jasmine made a bold decision. Using $20,000 of her savings and working from her studio apartment, she founded Taylor Tech Solutions when she was 27 years old. Her vision was revolutionary, a cybersecurity system that adapted in real time to emerging threats using algorithms she had developed during sleepless nights after her day job. Major corporations initially dismissed her company, until a series of devastating hacks targeted her competitors' clients while Taylor Tech's protection held firm. Within 3 years, Taylor Tech Solutions had secured contracts with 4 Fortune 500 companies. By year 5, that number had grown to 23. Jasmine expanded thoughtfully, hiring a diverse team of brilliant minds who had also been overlooked by the tech establishment. Her company culture became legendary, demanding excellence while fostering genuine inclusion. Through disciplined financial management and strategic growth, Jasmine built a personal net worth exceeding $250 million. Yet few people would guess her wealth from her lifestyle. She still drove the same Toyota Camry she had purchased when her company first became profitable. Her wardrobe consisted of well-made but simple clothing, and she lived in a modest home in Atlanta's Virginia Highland neighborhood. Most surprisingly to those who knew her financial status, Jasmine almost always flew economy class. "I want to understand the experience my customers have," she explained to her baffled financial advisor. "How can I build security systems for everyday users if I'm completely disconnected from their reality?" This philosophy extended to her investment strategy as well. Rather than limiting herself to tech, Jasmine diversified widely, purchasing significant stakes in industries ranging from healthcare to transportation. 6 months ago, she had acquired 22% of Skyline Airlines, making her the second largest shareholder after the company's founder. Only one person fully understood the extent of Jasmine's financial empire, her executive assistant, Darius Washington. A former classmate from Georgia Tech, Darius had been with Jasmine since she founded Taylor Tech. Their partnership was built on absolute trust and shared values. "Ms. Taylor doesn't play the same game as other executives," Darius often said. "She's playing chess while they're playing checkers." Today, Jasmine was preparing for perhaps the most significant moment in her professional life. Tomorrow morning, she would deliver the keynote address at TechSecure, the industry's premier cybersecurity conference in San Francisco. Her speech would unveil Taylor Tech's most ambitious project yet, an artificial intelligence system designed to protect critical infrastructure from next-generation cyber threats. As she packed her carry-on bag for her Skyline Airlines flight, Jasmine reviewed her presentation one final time. She had no idea that this routine business trip would transform not just her career, but an entire industry. The Atlanta International Airport hummed with its usual chaotic energy as Jasmine wheeled her compact carry-on toward the Skyline Airlines check-in counter. The terminal gleamed with polished floors and bright lighting, showcasing the recent $100 million renovation that had made it a model for modern air travel. Jasmine checked her watch. 2 hours before departure, perfect timing to navigate security without rushing. The Skyline Airlines premium check-in area featured plush carpeting and sleek counters, a stark contrast to the crowded general check-in line stretching across the terminal floor. Despite her first-class ticket, a rare splurge she'd allowed for the important conference, Jasmine approached the counter with her typical understated confidence. Behind the counter stood Philip Greenwood, a thin man with meticulously combed blonde hair and a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He glanced up briefly as Jasmine approached, then immediately looked past her, searching for someone else. "Good morning," Jasmine said pleasantly. "I'm checking in for the San Francisco flight." Philip's eyes finally settled on her, his gaze flicking over her simple black pants, white blouse, and blazer. "Economy check-in is in that direction," he said, pointing toward the significantly longer line across the terminal without looking at her ticket or ID. Jasmine placed her passport and confirmation email on the counter. "Actually, I have a first-class ticket." Philip's eyebrows rose slightly as he reluctantly took the documents. "I see," he said, his tone making it clear that he didn't. His fingers moved lazily across the keyboard. "And how did you book this ticket?" "Through my company account, the same as most business travelers," Jasmine replied evenly, noting the unnecessary question. "Right." Philip continued typing, his skepticism evident. "And will you be wanting to check any bags today?" "No, just my carry-on." Philip glanced at her small suitcase and back to his screen. "You know," he said with a condescending smile, "first-class passengers are allowed 2 checked bags at no additional cost." "I'm aware of the benefits," Jasmine said. "I prefer to travel light." Philip nodded slowly as if speaking to someone who didn't understand a simple concept. "While I have you here," Jasmine continued, "I'd like to make sure my preferences are noted for the meal service." "Of course," Philip replied, his tone shifting slightly. "Though I should mention, if you're interested in upgrading to first class, the cost would be an additional $1,200 each way." Jasmine blinked. "I just told you I already have a first-class ticket." "Oh." Philip feigned surprise, though his screen clearly displayed her booking information. "My mistake. Let me double-check that." He made a show of examining his monitor. "Yes, it seems you do. How unusual." Jasmine reached into her wallet and produced her Skyline Platinum member card, the highest tier in the airline's loyalty program. "I fly frequently. My preferences should already be in your system." Philip took the card, turning it over in his hands as if inspecting a potentially counterfeit bill. "This doesn't look like our current design," he said. "It was issued 3 months ago," Jasmine replied, her patience thinning. After several more minutes of unnecessary verification, Philip finally printed her boarding pass. "You've been selected for additional security screening," he announced, stamping her boarding pass with a red mark. "Security is to your right." Jasmine took her documents. "Is there a reason for the additional screening?" Philip shrugged. "It's random selection, ma'am." As Jasmine walked toward security, she noticed none of the white passengers from the first-class line had received the same random designation. At the security checkpoint, she was directed to a separate line where the inspection proved far more thorough than what she observed others experiencing. Her laptop was swabbed twice, her carry-on emptied completely, and she underwent an additional pat-down that felt unnecessarily invasive. "Is this standard procedure?" she asked the TSA agent, who avoided eye contact while repeating that it was protocol. After collecting her belongings, Jasmine checked her watch again. The random screening had cost her 30 minutes. As she walked toward her gate, a voice called out, "They got you too, huh?" Jasmine turned to see a tall black man in a tailored suit approaching. He nodded toward the red stamp on her boarding pass. "Terrence Jackson," he said, extending his hand. "I couldn't help but notice we received the same random treatment." Jasmine shook his hand. "Jasmine Taylor. Do you fly Skyline often?" "Too often," Terrence replied with a knowing smile. "Executive for Pharmatech. I've logged over 100,000 miles with Skyline in the past year alone." "And how many random screenings in that time?" Jasmine asked. "I've stopped counting," Terrence said. "But I can tell you this, it happens a lot more on Skyline than other airlines I've used." They walked together toward the first-class lounge, Terrence explaining that he'd filed 3 formal complaints about Skyline's treatment of minority passengers, all of which received generic responses about the airline's commitment to equal treatment. "The problem goes beyond the check-in counter," Terrence explained in a lowered voice. "I've documented at least 7 incidents where black passengers in first class received noticeably different service. Slower response times to call buttons, fewer drink offers, last-to-be-served meals. Have you considered switching airlines?" Jasmine asked. Terrence nodded. "Working on it. But Skyline has the most direct flights to our key research facilities." He paused, then added, "Between you and me, there are rumors about a class action discrimination suit brewing against them. Nothing public yet, but several executives I know have experienced similar issues." Jasmine felt a chill run through her. As a major shareholder in Skyline, this wasn't just disturbing from a moral perspective, it was potentially devastating business information. "Thank you for sharing this," she said sincerely. "I had no idea the situation was so systemic." "Just watch yourself," Terrence advised as they reached the lounge entrance. "And document everything. That's the only way things will ever change." As they parted ways, Jasmine discreetly opened her phone and sent a text to Darius, "Need background on discrimination complaints against Skyline Airlines. Urgent." Darius's response came immediately, "On it." "Everything okay?" "Not sure yet," Jasmine replied. "But I'm starting to think our investment might have some serious ethical complications." With that troubling thought, Jasmine approached the entrance to the first-class lounge, unaware that the true test of Skyline's culture was about to unfold. The Skyline Airlines first-class lounge entrance featured elegant glass doors emblazoned with the company's silver wing logo. A sign beside the entrance proudly proclaimed, "Where premium travel begins." Jasmine approached the reception desk, boarding pass and ID in hand. Behind the polished marble counter stood Sandra Miller, a woman in her 50s with expertly highlighted blonde hair and a blue Skyline uniform that looked freshly pressed. She was chatting animatedly with a white male passenger, laughing at something he said. As Jasmine approached, Sandra's smile faded, and she raised her hand in a stopping gesture. "Excuse me," Sandra said, not bothering to hide her annoyance at the interruption. "The general waiting area is back down the concourse." "I'm a first-class passenger," Jasmine replied calmly, sliding her boarding pass and platinum member card across the counter. "I'd like to use the lounge before my flight." Sandra glanced at the documents without picking them up. "There must be some mistake. This lounge is for our premium customers only." "Yes, I understand. I am a premium customer." Jasmine tapped her boarding pass where "First Class" was clearly printed. With visible reluctance, Sandra finally picked up the boarding pass, examining it with exaggerated scrutiny. The white male passenger she'd been chatting with was now watching the interaction with undisguised interest. "This looks unusual," Sandra said. "We've had issues with boarding pass alterations recently." I'll need to verify this. Jasmine maintained her composure. By all means. Sandra picked up a phone, turning away from Jasmine as she spoke in hushed tones. After a moment, she turned back. The system is showing some discrepancy. Are you sure you didn't request an economy seat when booking? Positive, Jasmine replied firmly. As you can see, I have a platinum membership card as well. By now, several other passengers in the lounge had begun to stare. Sandra's voice grew louder, seemingly intentionally. Well, regardless of what happened with your booking, perhaps you'd feel more comfortable in the general waiting area. It can get rather exclusive in here. The implication hung in the air, causing Jasmine's cheeks to burn despite her determination to remain dignified. Before she could respond, a new voice entered the conversation. Is there a problem, Sandra? A tall white man in an expensive suit approached the desk. Jasmine recognized him immediately from Skyline's promotional materials and annual reports, Clayton Williams, the airline CEO. His presence in the Atlanta lounge was unexpected. According to the reports Jasmine had read, he was typically based at the company headquarters in Dallas. Mr. Williams, Sandra straightened immediately. I was just explaining to this passenger that there may be an issue with her boarding pass. Clayton glanced at Jasmine, then at her documents still on the counter. His expression remained neutral, but Jasmine noticed a slight tightening around his eyes. I see, he said, neither intervening nor addressing Jasmine directly. The moment stretched uncomfortably as Clayton simply stood there, not helping but not leaving either. His presence seemed to embolden Sandra. As I was saying, she continued, pushing the boarding pass back toward Jasmine, until we can sort this out, the general waiting area would be more appropriate. Jasmine had endured enough. I'd like to speak with a manager, please. Sandra's lips pressed into a thin line. I am the senior attendant on duty. Then I'd like to speak with your supervisor, Jasmine insisted, her voice level but firm. With obvious irritation, Sandra picked up the phone again. Clayton Williams remained nearby, pretending to check his phone but clearly monitoring the situation. He made no move to intervene despite his authority to immediately resolve the issue. Minutes later, a harried-looking man in his 40s hurried into the lounge. His name tag identified him as Benjamin Allen, lounge manager. What seems to be the issue? He asked, looking between Sandra and Jasmine. Sandra spoke first. This passenger is insisting she has access to the lounge, but there appears to be a discrepancy with her documentation. Benjamin turned to Jasmine, his expression professionally neutral but his eyes cold. May I see your boarding pass, ma'am? Jasmine handed over her documents once again. Benjamin examined them briefly, then checked something on the computer terminal. I see, he said finally. It appears you do have a first-class ticket, Ms. Taylor. My apologies for the confusion. His tone made it clear the apology was merely procedural. He handed back her documents and nodded toward the lounge. You may enter. As Jasmine gathered her belongings, Benjamin turned to Sandra and said in a lowered voice that was still perfectly audible to Jasmine, these people always want to make a scene. The comment struck Jasmine like a physical blow. She stood frozen for a moment, aware of the curious stares from other passengers and the complete lack of genuine remorse from either Sandra or Benjamin. Most tellingly, CEO Clayton Williams had heard the comment clearly, his slight flinch confirmed it, yet he said nothing, merely turning away to walk back into the lounge. With as much dignity as she could muster, Jasmine entered the lounge and found a seat in a quiet corner. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her phone. This wasn't just poor customer service, it was blatant discrimination happening under the direct observation of the company's CEO. She dialed Darius's number. Darius, she said quietly when he answered. I need you to prepare Plan Delta. Plan Delta was their code for major financial maneuvers, typically reserved for emergency situations or exceptional opportunities. They had used it only twice in the company's history. Plan Delta. Darius sounded alarmed. Jasmine, what's happening? I'll explain everything later, she replied, watching as Clayton Williams settled into a seat across the lounge, deliberately avoiding looking in her direction. But I've just witnessed something that changes everything about our Skyline investment. Should I start liquidating our position? Darius asked. No, Jasmine said after a moment of thought. Not yet. But get everything ready. And Darius, I need all the information you can find on Clayton Williams. Personal background, management history, everything. I'm on it, Darius confirmed. Be careful, Jasmine. As she ended the call, Jasmine noticed Clayton Williams watching her from across the lounge, his expression unreadable. She held his gaze steadily until he looked away first. For the remaining 45 minutes before boarding, Jasmine sat quietly, documenting everything that had occurred since her arrival at the airport. Each interaction, each comment, each microaggression. The systematic pattern was becoming increasingly clear, and the implications for both Skyline Airlines and her investment were profound. The boarding announcement came over the lounge speakers. As Jasmine gathered her things, she noticed Clayton Williams doing the same. Their paths would cross again, she was certain. And when they did, she would be prepared. Attention Skyline passengers on Flight 1876 to San Francisco. We will now begin our pre-boarding process for Diamond Elite members, passengers requiring special assistance, and our first-class customers. The announcement echoed through the terminal as Jasmine approached Gate B22. After the lounge incident, she had deliberately waited until the last moment to leave the relative sanctuary of a quiet corner coffee shop. Her hope for a smooth boarding process evaporated quickly. At the gate podium stood Melissa Parker, a petite woman with auburn hair pulled back in a severe bun. As Jasmine approached with her boarding pass, Melissa held up her hand without looking up from her computer. First class only right now, she stated flatly. Economy boarding will begin in approximately 20 minutes. I am in first class, Jasmine replied, extending her boarding pass. Melissa finally looked up, her eyes widening almost imperceptibly before narrowing again. She took the boarding pass, studied it with exaggerated care, then handed it back. I'm sorry, but I can't read the seat number clearly. You'll need to wait until your zone is called. Jasmine pointed to the prominently displayed 1A on her boarding pass. My seat is 1A. First class. Ma'am, please step aside. You're holding up the line, Melissa insisted, gesturing toward the waiting area. The passengers behind Jasmine began to shift impatiently. She felt the familiar heat of embarrassment rising in her cheeks but stood her ground. My boarding pass clearly shows I'm in first class. I'd like to board now as announced. Melissa's lips thinned. Ma'am, I need to verify, excuse me, interrupted a voice from behind. An older white man in a business suit stepped forward. I couldn't help overhearing. The lady's boarding pass does say first class. I can see it from here. Melissa blinked, momentarily thrown off balance by the unexpected intervention. The man, who appeared to be in his 60s with salt and pepper hair, gave Jasmine a small nod. Howard Reynolds, he introduced himself quietly. Been flying this route weekly for 15 years. This isn't right. Melissa's demeanor shifted instantly. Mr. Reynolds, always good to see you. She glanced back at Jasmine's boarding pass, suddenly able to read it perfectly. Oh, I see the issue now. The printer must have smudged the information. My apologies, Ms. Taylor. You may board. Howard Reynolds shook his head slightly as he followed Jasmine down the jetway. Happens too often on this airline, he murmured. My daughter-in-law experiences the same thing. She's a neurosurgeon and still gets asked if she's in the right line. Thank you for speaking up, Jasmine said sincerely. Howard shrugged. Shouldn't have to. But until things change, those of us who see it need to say something. They parted ways as Jasmine continued to the first-class cabin. The sleek interior of the Boeing 787 typically would have impressed her, but today she noticed only the flight attendant's expression as she approached her seat. Victoria Cooper, according to her name tag, was arranging welcome champagne on a tray. Her practiced smile faltered momentarily as Jasmine stopped at row 1. "Can I help you find your seat?" Victoria asked, her tone suggesting Jasmine must be lost. "1A is my seat," Jasmine replied, stowing her carry-on in the overhead compartment. Victoria glanced at Jasmine's boarding pass. "Let me double-check that for you." Without waiting for a response, she took the boarding pass from Jasmine's hand and scrutinized it. "This does say 1A, she said, sounding genuinely surprised. "Are you sure this is your boarding pass?" The question was so absurd that Jasmine nearly laughed. "Yes, it's mine. My name is printed right there." Victoria handed it back reluctantly. "Very well. Would you care for champagne or orange juice before takeoff?" "Water, please," Jasmine replied, settling into the spacious seat. Victoria moved on to welcome other first-class passengers, her demeanor noticeably warmer with each white face she greeted. Jasmine observed quietly, documenting each interaction in her mental notes. The cabin gradually filled. Just as Jasmine thought she might have the luxury of an empty seat beside her, a familiar figure appeared. Clayton Williams, Skyline's CEO, paused at her row. "1B, he said, gesturing to the seat next to hers. His expression suggested this coincidence was as unwelcome to him as it was surprising to her. As he stowed his briefcase and settled in, Clayton cleared his throat. "Quite a coincidence, ending up as seatmates." Jasmine nodded politely but said nothing. "Flying to San Francisco for business or pleasure?" he attempted, falling back on standard airplane small talk. "Business," Jasmine replied. "The TechSecure conference." "Ah, cybersecurity," Clayton said, his tone suggesting he found the topic mildly interesting but not worth deep engagement. "Important field these days." Victoria reappeared with Jasmine's water, practically slamming it onto her tray table while delicately placing Clayton's requested scotch before him with a warm smile. "Mr. Williams, it's an honor to have you on board today. Please let me know if there's anything special you need during the flight." "Thank you, Victoria," he replied, somehow knowing her name without looking at her tag. "I appreciate it." As Victoria moved away, Clayton turned back to Jasmine. "So, what company are you with?" The question seemed innocent enough, but Jasmine noted he hadn't introduced himself or asked her name, as if her identity was of minimal importance. "Taylor Tech Solutions," she answered simply. "Never heard of it," Clayton replied with the casual dismissiveness of someone used to knowing all the players in any given industry. "Small startup?" "Not exactly," Jasmine said, taking out her tablet to review her presentation. Clayton seemed to take the hint and turned his attention to his own device. Jasmine used the moment to text Darius discreetly, "Confirm Plan Delta. Also, find out everything about Clayton Williams." The response came quickly, "Plan Delta ready. Williams file incoming." What would you do if you were in Jasmine's position? Comment number 1 if you think she should directly confront Clayton about the discrimination she's experienced. Comment number 2 if you believe she should gather more evidence before taking action. Comment number 3 if you think she should immediately implement Plan Delta, whatever that may be. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support stories that highlight these real-world issues. The flight attendants began their safety demonstration, but Jasmine barely noticed. Her mind was already calculating her next moves. How many other passengers like her had endured similar treatment? What would happen when Clayton Williams discovered exactly who was sitting next to him? And most importantly, what would be the consequences when Plan Delta was finally executed? 3 hours into the 5-hour flight, Jasmine noticed Clayton Williams growing increasingly restless beside her. Since takeoff, she had been reviewing complex financial documents on her tablet, spreadsheets detailing Skyline Airline's quarterly performance, projected earnings, and most critically, their vulnerability to stock fluctuations. The information wasn't confidential, it was available to any investor willing to do their homework. But Clayton's sideways glances at her screen had become more frequent and less subtle. When Victoria came by to refill his scotch, his third, Jasmine noted, Clayton finally broke the uncomfortable silence between them. "That looks like our Q3 forecast," he remarked, nodding toward her tablet. "Are you an analyst?" Jasmine adjusted her screen slightly away from his view. "I follow the transportation sector." "For a tech company?" His tone carried clear disbelief. "Diversification is important," she replied simply, continuing to scroll through the documents. Clayton shifted in his seat, his knee briefly knocking against hers before he hurriedly adjusted his position. "Transportation can be a tricky sector to understand without insider knowledge," he said, his confidence returning. "Airlines particularly. The public rarely grasps the complexity of our operating costs." "Is that so?" Jasmine asked, her voice neutral. Taking her response as interest, Clayton launched into an explanation. "Take fuel hedging, for instance. Most analysts look at current fuel prices and make linear projections. But we negotiate complex futures contracts that protect against price volatility while potentially sacrificing gains from sudden drops in crude oil prices," Jasmine finished for him. "Yes, I'm familiar with the concept." Clayton blinked, momentarily thrown. "Well, yes. But there's also the matter of route profitability. Many outsiders don't realize that certain routes are maintained despite marginal profitability because they feed passengers into more lucrative long-haul flights," Jasmine interjected again. "It's basic network theory applied to transportation. Nothing revolutionary." A flash of annoyance crossed Clayton's face. "You seem to have a surprisingly thorough understanding for someone outside the industry." "I have a background in business analytics," Jasmine replied. "Numbers tell stories if you know how to listen." Before Clayton could respond, the captain's voice came over the intercom announcing turbulence ahead. Seconds later, the aircraft began to shake, causing drinks to slosh in their glasses. Clayton's scotch spilled onto his tray table, narrowly missing his laptop. Victoria and another flight attendant rushed forward, armed with napkins. They attended to Clayton immediately, apologizing profusely for the spill he had clearly caused himself. Meanwhile, Jasmine's water had also spilled, but no one moved to help her. She calmly reached for her own napkin and cleaned up the mess. "These things happen," Clayton said to Victoria with a dismissive wave. "Not your fault." When the attendants had gone, he turned to Jasmine with a weak smile. "Sorry about that. Flight crew has enough to deal with during turbulence." "Indeed," Jasmine replied. "Though it's interesting how quickly they responded to your spill while ignoring mine." Clayton's smile faltered. "I'm sure they just didn't notice yours." "They looked directly at my tray," Jasmine pointed out. "Well, I am the CEO," he said, attempting to laugh it off. "They probably recognize me. So different standards of service based on who you perceive the customer to be is acceptable?" Jasmine asked, her voice still even but with an edge now. Clayton shifted uncomfortably. "That's not what He was interrupted by a news alert flashing across the in-flight entertainment screens. The headline read, "Breaking, Mystery Investor Making Major Moves on Skyline Airline Stock." Clayton's face drained of color as he stared at the screen. The brief segment showed financial analysts speculating about a potential takeover bid, with Skyline's stock price already showing unusual volatility. "Excuse me," he muttered, fumbling for his phone before remembering it wouldn't work at altitude. "Is the Wi-Fi functioning on this flight?" he asked sharply to no one in particular. Victoria appeared almost instantly. "It should be, Mr. Williams. Is there a problem? I need to check something urgently. Can you make sure the connection is working?" As Victoria hurried to assist him, Jasmine's tablet pinged with a message from Darius. "Somehow getting through despite the supposedly limited connectivity. It contained a comprehensive file on Clayton Williams. Jasmine scanned the information quickly, her expression remaining neutral despite the disturbing contents. According to Darius's research, there had been 17 formal discrimination complaints filed against Skyline during Clayton's 5-year tenure as CEO. All had been settled quietly with non-disclosure agreements. More damning was an internal memo Darius had somehow obtained, showing Clayton had personally blocked 3 separate board initiatives to improve diversity and inclusion within the company. Most shocking was the bonus structure Clayton had implemented for customer service representatives. Staff received higher commissions for selling premium seats to certain demographics while directing others toward economy options regardless of their stated preferences or budget. The policy never explicitly mentioned race, but the pattern was unmistakable in the data Darius had analyzed. As Clayton struggled to connect to the aircraft's Wi-Fi, growing visibly more agitated by the second, Jasmine calmly continued reading. There was more. Clayton had recently divorced his wife of 20 years after she had publicly criticized Skyline's corporate culture at a charity event. The divorce settlement included an unusual clause preventing her from discussing the airline in any public forum. By the time Clayton finally established his connection, Jasmine had absorbed enough information to confirm her suspicions. Skyline's issues weren't isolated incidents, they were systematic, deliberate, and Clayton Williams was not merely complicit but actively responsible. His frantic typing beside her told Jasmine that Plan Delta was already taking effect. The first phase involved Darius strategically purchasing and selling small blocks of Skyline stock through various accounts, nothing illegal, but enough to trigger algorithm-based trading systems and create noticeable market movement. Problems? Jasmine asked innocently as Clayton cursed under his breath. Nothing important, he replied tensely, continuing to refresh his stock tracker app. Just some market fluctuations. Markets can be unpredictable, Jasmine observed. Especially when investors discover something concerning about a company's practices. Clayton's head snapped toward her, his eyes narrowing. What's that supposed to mean? The moment had arrived. Jasmine turned to face him directly, her voice low but crystal clear. It means, Mr. Williams, that we need to talk about what's happening at Skyline Airlines. I don't know what you're talking about, Clayton Williams said, closing his laptop with more force than necessary. His attempt at a dismissive tone was undermined by the beads of sweat forming along his hairline. Jasmine maintained steady eye contact. I think you do. Since the moment I arrived at the airport, I've experienced a pattern of treatment that can only be described as discriminatory. And based on my conversation with another passenger, my experience isn't unique. Clayton glanced around the cabin, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Look, if you had some subpar customer service interactions, I apologize. Perhaps some of our staff were having a bad day. A bad day that affected only passengers who look like me? Jasmine countered. The check-in agent assumed I belonged in economy without seeing my ticket. The lounge attendant refused to believe my documentation was valid. The gate agent claimed she couldn't read my clearly printed boarding pass. And the flight attendant has checked my seat assignment 3 times while offering you premium service. You're being oversensitive, Clayton replied, lowering his voice. Not everything is about race. Jasmine removed her phone from her purse. I documented each interaction. The pattern is undeniable. What are you, some kind of corporate spy? Clayton hissed. Recording our staff to file frivolous complaints? I'm a business traveler who was treated differently based on my appearance, Jasmine replied calmly. And as a significant investor in multiple industries, I find that concerning. The word, investor, caught Clayton's attention. His eyes narrowed. Investor? In what? Various companies. Including airlines. A flicker of worry crossed Clayton's face before he masked it with a condescending smile. Well, if you have concerns about your investment portfolio, I suggest speaking with your financial advisor. This is hardly the appropriate venue for such discussions. Jasmine nodded thoughtfully. You're right. A public conversation isn't ideal. Perhaps we should arrange a more formal meeting. I'd be interested in discussing Skyline's approach to diversity and inclusion. Particularly the bonus structure that incentivizes staff to direct certain demographics away from premium services. Clayton's face paled. That's proprietary business information. You couldn't possibly. I also found the board's rejected proposals for anti-bias training quite illuminating, Jasmine continued as if he hadn't spoken. 3 separate initiatives, all personally blocked by the CEO. That's a concerning pattern for investors who value ethical leadership. Clayton's facade cracked. His voice dropped to an angry whisper. Who the hell are you? Someone who believes companies should treat all customers with equal respect, Jasmine replied evenly. Someone who's witnessed enough today to question whether Skyline shares that belief. Clayton's jaw clenched. You have no idea how this industry works. Our premium customers have certain expectations about their environment. We're simply catering to market preferences. Expectations about their environment? Jasmine repeated, raising an eyebrow. And what exactly does that mean, Mr. Williams? Realizing his mistake, Clayton backpedaled. I meant the level of service, the amenities. I think you meant the demographics, Jasmine interrupted, activating the voice recorder on her phone discreetly under the pretense of checking a message. Clayton noticed the movement. Are you recording this conversation? That's illegal. California is a 2-party consent state, Jasmine acknowledged. But we're currently in federal airspace, where different regulations apply. Besides, I'm simply taking notes on my phone about my travel experience. Their increasingly tense exchange had attracted attention. Victoria appeared beside them, her concerned expression directed solely at Clayton. Is everything all right, Mr. Williams? Is this woman bothering you? The question was so blatantly biased that even Clayton looked uncomfortable. Everything's fine, Victoria. Just a spirited business discussion. Victoria lingered, her eyes suspicious as she looked at Jasmine. If you need anything, just press your call button. After she left, Clayton sighed heavily. Look, I don't know what your agenda is, but my agenda is transparency, Jasmine cut in. And accountability. I invest in companies that reflect my values, and I'm beginning to question whether Skyline is one of them. Clayton's expression hardened. If you're implying what I think you are, be careful. Skyline has an excellent legal team. Defamation isn't taken lightly. Neither is discrimination, Jasmine countered. Or securities fraud, for that matter. I notice Skyline's public statements about its corporate culture don't align with its internal practices. That discrepancy could interest the SEC as well as civil rights attorneys. Clayton stared at her, reassessing. You mentioned being an investor. In what capacity? I hold positions in several transportation companies, Jasmine replied vaguely. Clayton laughed, a short, dismissive sound. Well, whoever you are, I can assure you that our major investors are fully briefed on our business strategies. We would know if someone like you was a significant stakeholder. The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. Jasmine simply smiled and returned to her tablet, leaving Clayton to stew in uncertainty. The tension between them had become palpable enough that other passengers had noticed. A distinguished older man across the aisle, Captain James Harrison according to his uniform, observed them with interest. As the most senior pilot not currently flying the aircraft, he was traveling to San Francisco to command the return flight. Victoria approached Captain Harrison and whispered something. He frowned, looking between Jasmine and Clayton before standing and making his way over. Mr. Williams, he said respectfully. Victoria mentioned there might be a situation requiring attention. Clayton straightened in his seat, clearly relieved to have an ally. Captain Harrison. No real issue, just a passenger with some concerns about our service protocols. Captain Harrison turned to Jasmine. Ma'am, I understand you may have had some disappointing experiences today. Perhaps I can address them? His tone was professional but carried the same underlying assumption as the others, that Jasmine was being difficult, that her concerns couldn't possibly be legitimate. Captain, Jasmine began, I've been documenting a pattern of differential treatment since I arrived at the airport. As both a first-class passenger and an investor in Skyline Airlines, I find this pattern troubling. Captain Harrison's eyebrows rose at the word, investor, and he glanced at Clayton, whose expression had become increasingly strained. An investor, the captain repeated. Ms. Taylor was just explaining her small portfolio to me, Clayton interjected quickly. She holds some transportation stocks and has opinions about our business model. Not just opinions, Jasmine corrected calmly. Questions. About policies that appear to systematically direct certain passengers away from premium services based on their appearance. Captain Harrison looked genuinely confused. I'm not aware of any such policies. That's because they don't exist, Clayton said firmly. Ms. Taylor is misinterpreting standard customer service procedures. Then you won't mind explaining why your bonus structure rewards staff for selling premium services almost exclusively to white passengers? Jasmine asked. The captain's expression shifted. Mr. Williams? Clayton's face flushed. That's a gross mischaracterization of a complex sales incentive program. And frankly, it's proprietary information that shouldn't be discussed here. The dynamic had changed. Captain Harrison was now looking at Clayton with uncertainty, while other first-class passengers had fallen silent, clearly listening to the exchange. Captain, Clayton said tersely, perhaps we should continue this discussion privately after landing. Harrison nodded slowly. Of course. Ms. Taylor, we take all passenger concerns seriously. I'll personally ensure this matter receives appropriate attention. As he returned to his seat, Clayton turned to Jasmine, his voice barely audible. You've made a serious mistake today. Whatever game you're playing, it ends when we land. Jasmine met his gaze steadily. You're right about one thing, Mr. Williams. Something definitely ends when we land. The descent into San Francisco International Airport would typically offer spectacular views of the city's iconic skyline and the shimmering bay, but today the cabin remained unusually quiet as the aircraft broke through the cloud cover. The tension from Jasmine and Clayton's confrontation had spread throughout the first-class cabin, creating an atmosphere thick with unspoken questions. Clayton had spent the remainder of the flight alternating between furious typing on his laptop and making hurried notes on his phone, clearly preparing for whatever awaited him on the ground. Occasionally he would glance at Jasmine with a mixture of suspicion and concern, but he avoided further conversation. As the wheels touched down on the runway, Clayton immediately turned on his phone, disregarding the flight attendant's instructions to keep devices off until the aircraft reached the gate. His expression darkened as a flood of notifications appeared on his screen. When the seatbelt sign finally turned off, Clayton stood abruptly. Victoria, he called to the flight attendant, I need to deplane immediately. Victoria nodded deferentially. Of course, Mr. Williams. I'll make sure you're the first off. And, Clayton added quietly, gesturing toward Jasmine, I believe security should speak with this passenger before she leaves the aircraft. She's been making concerning statements about the company. Victoria's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded again. I'll alert the ground team. Jasmine, who had overheard every word, remained composed as she gathered her belongings. She had anticipated this move. It was exactly what someone like Clayton would do when feeling cornered. Use his position of power to silence the perceived threat. True to his request, Clayton was escorted to the door the moment the jetway was secured. He departed without a backward glance, phone already pressed to his ear. As the other first-class passengers began to stand, Victoria approached Jasmine. Ma'am, I need you to remain seated, she said, her voice carrying enough for nearby passengers to hear. Security will board to speak with you shortly. An elderly woman across the aisle frowned. What did she do? Victoria ignored the question. This is a private matter. As the cabin emptied, Jasmine sat patiently, using the time to send a brief message to Darius. Implemented Countermeasure C, meet me at gate as planned. Countermeasure C was their protocol for situations involving security or law enforcement, another contingency they had developed years ago after Jasmine had been wrongfully detained at a tech conference when security didn't believe she was a keynote speaker. When the last passenger had departed, two uniformed airport security officers boarded the plane. Their expressions were stern as they approached Jasmine. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us," the taller officer stated. "There's been a complaint about disruptive behavior during the flight." Jasmine stood calmly. "Officer, I've been recording my entire experience today, including this interaction. I was not disruptive in any way. I had a private conversation with another passenger about business matters." The officers exchanged glances. The mention of recording had given them pause. "Nevertheless, we need to take a statement," the second officer said, his tone slightly less authoritative. "I'm happy to provide one," Jasmine replied, "but I'll be doing so in the terminal, not in a private room, and I'll be calling my attorney before answering any substantive questions." Her confident demeanor clearly wasn't what they had expected. After a brief conference, they agreed to escort her to the terminal rather than to a security office. As they walked through the jetway, Jasmine held her head high, aware of the stares from passengers who had witnessed her being detained. In the terminal, Darius Washington was waiting as planned. At 6'3" with broad shoulders and impeccable tailoring, his presence was commanding. He stepped forward immediately, hand extended to the officers. Darius Washington, General Counsel for Taylor Tech Solutions, he introduced himself smoothly, producing a business card. "I understand there's been some confusion regarding my colleague." The security officer's demeanor shifted noticeably. "Sir, we received a complaint about disruptive behavior on the flight." "From whom?" Darius asked. "That's confidential information," the first officer replied. "Was it Clayton Williams, CEO of Skyline Airlines?" Darius pressed. When the officers didn't respond, he continued. "I thought so. Officers, Ms. Taylor is the founder and CEO of Taylor Tech Solutions and a major shareholder in Skyline Airlines. Mr. Williams is attempting to intimidate her after she raised concerns about discriminatory practices she experienced today." The officers looked uncertainly between Jasmine and Darius. "We still need to file a report," the second officer said, though his conviction had clearly wavered. "Of course," Jasmine agreed. "And I'll be filing one as well, documenting the pattern of discriminatory treatment I've experienced since arriving at the Atlanta airport this morning." As they completed the necessary paperwork, with Jasmine providing only the most basic information under Darius's watchful eye, Darius handed her a tablet. On the screen was a financial news site with the headline, "Skyline Airlines stock fluctuates amid rumors of discrimination scandal." "It's begun," Darius said quietly. The financial press picked up on the unusual trading patterns. "Phase 1 of Plan Delta is complete." Jasmine nodded, scrolling through the article. The stock had dropped 8% already, and trading volume had tripled, all based on rumors and speculation without any concrete allegations yet made public. Once the security officers departed, Darius guided Jasmine to a quiet corner of the terminal. "Are you okay? What happened on that flight?" Jasmine recounted the day's events in detail, from the check-in counter through the confrontation with Clayton Williams. Darius listened intently, occasionally making notes on his tablet. "This is worse than we thought," he said when she finished. "The discrimination isn't just passive, it's built into their business model. Clayton Williams has created a corporate culture that actively undermines minority customers' access to premium services. And as 22% shareholders, we're complicit if we do nothing," Jasmine added grimly. "So what's our next move?" Darius asked. "Full implementation of Plan Delta would mean liquidating our position and publicly stating why. It would likely tank their stock completely. Jasmine gazed out the terminal window at the planes taking off and landing. Thousands of employees would be affected, she said softly. Most of whom probably have no idea what's happening at the executive level. True, Darius acknowledged. But maintaining our investment in a company with these practices goes against everything Taylor Tech stands for. As they debated their options, a young black woman in a Skyline uniform approached hesitantly. Her name tag identified her as Amara Johnson, flight attendant. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you the passenger from Flight 1876 who was just escorted off by security?" Jasmine nodded cautiously. Amara glanced around nervously. "I overheard some of your conversation with Mr. Williams. About the bonus structure and how certain passengers are treated." She took a deep breath. "It's all true. I've been documenting it for months." "Documenting it?" Darius asked. Tears filled Amara's eyes. "I've worked for Skyline for 3 years. I've been passed over for senior positions 4 times in favor of less experienced white colleagues. When I asked my supervisor why, she said I didn't fit the premium service image Skyline wants to project." Jasmine felt a surge of anger. "Have you filed a complaint?" "2," Amara replied. "Both dismissed as misunderstandings. After the second one, my hours were cut. I can't afford to lose this job, my mother's medical bills." She trailed off, wiping away a tear. "You're not alone," Jasmine said gently. "How many other employees have similar experiences?" "Dozens that I know of," Amara said. "We have a private group chat. Nobody feels safe speaking publicly." Jasmine and Darius exchanged looks. This changed everything. The problem wasn't just about customer discrimination, it extended to employment practices as well. "Amara," Jasmine said, making a decision, "would you be willing to share your documentation with us? Anonymously, if necessary." "What would you do with it?" Amara asked cautiously. "Help create accountability," Jasmine replied. "I have the resources to ensure that voices like yours are heard without putting individual employees at risk." Amara hesitated, then nodded. "If you really can make a difference, yes. I'll share everything I have." As Amara wrote down her contact information, Jasmine felt her resolve hardening. The question of whether to implement Plan Delta fully had been answered, but not in the way she had originally conceived it. "Darius," she said as Amara departed, "call the legal team. We're not selling our Skyline shares." Darius looked surprised. "We're not?" "No," Jasmine replied, a new determination in her voice. "We're buying more. And then we're going to use our position to force change from within. Starting with the removal of Clayton Williams. That's going to be a battle," Darius warned. Jasmine picked up her carry-on bag, her decision made. "Then we better get ready for war." The 40-story glass tower housing Skyline Airline San Francisco offices dominated the downtown skyline, its sleek architecture meant to evoke the company's forward-thinking image. By 6 o'clock that evening, the building's 28th floor boardroom had become the stage for what one executive would later describe as corporate theater at its most dramatic. News of the emergency board meeting had spread quickly through Skyline's executive ranks. Clayton Williams had called it personally, citing an urgent threat to company stability, without providing specifics. Board members had rearranged schedules and canceled dinners to attend, some joining remotely from various time zones. Inside the boardroom, the tension was palpable. Clayton paced at the head of the polished mahogany table, occasionally glancing at his phone where stock updates showed Skyline shares continuing their unprecedented volatility. The 14 board members present watched him with expressions ranging from concern to irritation. "Clayton, it's been 15 minutes, said Elizabeth Morgan, the board's senior-most member. "Are you going to tell us why we're here, or should we continue watching you wear down the carpet?" Clayton stopped pacing and braced his hands on the table. "We have a situation. A potential hostile action against the company. This got everyone's attention. Lawrence Peterson, the CFO, leaned forward. A takeover attempt? By whom? I'm still gathering details, Clayton replied, but it appears a previously unknown investor has been accumulating a significant position in Skyline stock. Today they began making moves that triggered unusual market activity. How significant? Asked Robert Chen, head of international operations. Clayton hesitated. Potentially enough to influence major decisions if they align with other shareholders. That's still vague, Clayton, Elizabeth noted. What exactly are you worried about? Before he could answer, the boardroom door opened. All heads turned as Jasmine Taylor entered, followed by Darius Washington and two others carrying leather portfolios. The room fell silent. Clayton's face darkened. Security. How did these people get up here? A young assistant hovering near the door looked confused. Sir, they had proper clearance. Ms. Taylor is listed as an authorized visitor. That's impossible, Clayton snapped. I never. Your assistant was kind enough to add us to the list when I explained I'm a major shareholder with urgent business to discuss, Jasmine interjected smoothly. I believe this meeting concerns me directly. The board members exchanged glances. Elizabeth Morgan adjusted her glasses. And you are? Jasmine Taylor, CEO of Taylor Tech Solutions, she replied, her voice clear and confident. And holder of 22% of Skyline Airline's outstanding shares. The pronouncement landed like a thunderclap. Lawrence Peterson choked on his water. Robert Chen's mouth fell open. Elizabeth Morgan removed her glasses completely, as if they might be showing her an incorrect image. That's absurd, Clayton declared. Our shareholder registry doesn't show any such position. Darius stepped forward, opening his portfolio. The shares are held through various investment vehicles, as is common for positions of this size. Here's the complete documentation, verified by your own transfer agent this afternoon. He distributed copies to each board member. The room fell silent as they reviewed the papers, the only sound the occasional rustle of turning pages. This appears to be in order, Elizabeth finally said, looking up at Jasmine with new interest. Ms. Taylor, I believe you're entitled to address this board. Please, take a seat. She most certainly is not entitled to barge into a private board meeting. Clayton protested. This is completely irregular. So is calling an emergency meeting without proper disclosure to a 22% shareholder, Jasmine countered, taking the empty seat at the far end of the table, directly opposite Clayton. Darius and her team arranged themselves behind her. Perhaps, Elizabeth suggested diplomatically, Mr. Williams could explain why he called this meeting, and then Ms. Taylor can address any concerns from her perspective. Clayton straightened his tie, visibly trying to regain control of the situation. As I was saying, there appears to be a coordinated effort to manipulate our stock price and destabilize the company. I believe this is part of a scheme to force changes in our business practices. What changes? Robert Chen asked. Clayton's eyes flickered to Jasmine. Ms. Taylor and I had a disagreement on today's flight from Atlanta regarding certain operational procedures. She made vague accusations about our customer service protocols. Shortly afterward, unusual trading patterns in our stock began. That's a serious allegation, Elizabeth said, turning to Jasmine. Ms. Taylor, your response? Jasmine nodded. I'd be happy to clarify. Today, I experienced a pattern of discriminatory treatment as a first-class passenger on Skyline Flight 1876. When I addressed this with Mr. Williams, who happened to be seated beside me, he dismissed my concerns and eventually attempted to have me detained by airport security upon landing. She paused to let this sink in before continuing. As a significant investor in this company, I found both the discrimination and Mr. Williams' response deeply troubling. However, what I discovered subsequently is far more concerning. Jasmine signaled to one of her team members, who distributed another set of documents. These materials document a systematic pattern of discrimination at Skyline Airlines, both toward passengers and employees. Most disturbing is this, she pointed to a highlighted section, the bonus structure that actively incentivizes staff to direct minority passengers away from premium services while reserving them for white customers. The board members' reactions varied wildly. Some appeared shocked, others skeptical, a few notably unsurprised. "This is proprietary information," Clayton exclaimed. "How did you obtain these internal documents?" "The better question," Elizabeth interjected, "is whether they're accurate." Clayton faltered. "They're being presented completely out of context. Our sales incentive program is based on complex algorithms designed to maximize revenue, algorithms that happen to consistently disadvantage minority passengers," Jasmine finished for him. "And that's just the beginning. We've documented 17 settled discrimination complaints during Mr. Williams' tenure, all silenced through NDAs. Plus 3 rejected board initiatives for diversity training, rejections that came directly from the CEO's office." Lawrence Peterson looked troubled. "Clayton, is this true about the training initiatives? The board approved funding for those programs." "The timing wasn't right for implementation," Clayton said dismissively. "We had more pressing operational concerns." "More pressing than ensuring equal treatment of our customers and staff?" asked Daniela Rodriguez, the newest board member. "This is deeply concerning." Clayton's expression hardened. "This is exactly the kind of internal division Ms. Taylor is trying to create. She's using one supposed incident to drive a wedge through this company." "It wasn't one incident," came a new voice from the doorway. All heads turned to see Captain James Harrison standing there, still in his uniform. Behind him stood Howard Reynolds from the flight and 3 other passengers. "Captain Harrison," Clayton said, his voice strained. "This is a closed board meeting." "I apologize for the interruption," Harrison replied, "but after witnessing today's events and reviewing Ms. Taylor's concerns, I felt compelled to come forward." He addressed the board directly. "I've been with Skyline for 27 years. In the past 5 years, I've observed a troubling shift in our service culture. What a mess Taylor experienced today. I've seen it happen repeatedly." Howard Reynolds stepped forward. "I'm a Diamond Elite member with over 2 million miles on Skyline. Today I watched this woman," he gestured to Jasmine, "be repeatedly questioned about her first-class status despite having valid documentation. It was blatant discrimination, and it's not the first time I've witnessed it." One by one, the other passengers shared similar observations. Clayton's face grew increasingly flushed as they spoke. When they finished, the boardroom fell into a heavy silence. Elizabeth Morgan finally broke it. "I believe we need to address these allegations seriously. I move that we form an independent committee to investigate these claims immediately." "I second the motion," Daniela Rodriguez said quickly. "And I propose," Jasmine added, "that during this investigation, Mr. Williams temporarily step aside from his duties as CEO." Clayton slammed his hand on the table. "This is outrageous. You come in here with stolen documents and coached witnesses. We didn't know Ms. Taylor before today," Howard Reynolds interrupted. "We came here on our own after hearing about the emergency board meeting from Captain Harrison." "The evidence speaks for itself," Jasmine said calmly. "The question now is whether this board will address it or ignore it." Elizabeth called for a vote on the independent investigation. The result was unanimous in favor, even from board members who had initially seemed skeptical. The vote on Clayton's temporary removal was closer, 8-6 in favor, with Clayton himself not voting. As the reality of his suspension sank in, Clayton pointed an accusing finger at Jasmine. "This isn't over. You manipulated the market today. I'll see you investigated for securities fraud." Jasmine met his gaze steadily. "All trading activities were completely legal and properly disclosed. But if you want to discuss market manipulation, perhaps we should examine how Skyline's stock price has been artificially supported by hiding discrimination complaints from shareholders, a material risk that should have been disclosed in your SEC filings." Clayton had no response to this. A security officer appeared at the doorway, ready to escort him from the building. As he gathered his belongings, the defeated CEO looked back at the board members who had just voted to suspend him. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. "She's just using this supposed incident to take control." "It wasn't supposed," said a soft voice. Amara Johnson, the flight attendant from earlier, had entered the room. Behind her stood 5 other Skyline employees, each carrying folders. "We have documentation going back 3 years," Amara said, her voice gaining strength. "Emails, performance reviews, passenger complaints, all showing the same pattern." Clayton stared at them in disbelief before finally allowing himself to be escorted out. As the door closed behind him, the real work began. For the next 4 hours, the board reviewed evidence, heard testimony, and gradually came to terms with the scope of the problem they had allowed to develop under their oversight. By the time the meeting adjourned at nearly midnight, they had approved a comprehensive plan for investigation and reform. As Jasmine packed up her materials, Elizabeth Morgan approached her. "The board would like to offer you the interim CEO position while we conduct our search. With your business background and commitment to addressing these issues, you'd be an ideal candidate." Jasmine looked up, surprised. This was an unexpected development, and one that would give her direct control over implementing the changes she sought. It was, by conventional wisdom, a perfect victory. Yet something about it felt wrong. "I need to consider it," she replied. "And I have some alternative proposals I'd like to discuss tomorrow." As she left the tower with Darius, the San Francisco night air cool against her face, Jasmine already knew what her answer would be. Taking Clayton's place wasn't the solution, it would only perpetuate the same top-down power structure that had allowed these problems to flourish in the first place. Real change would require something more radical. And she had just the plan. 6 months after the boardroom confrontation, Jasmine Taylor stood at a podium in Skyline Airline's newly renovated training center in Atlanta. Before her sat 300 Skyline employees, flight attendants, gate agents, pilots, and administrative staff, attending the company's redesigned customer experience workshop. "Transformation doesn't happen overnight," Jasmine told the attentive audience. "It requires constant vigilance, honest feedback, and the courage to acknowledge when we've fallen short of our values." The journey to this moment had been neither simple nor straightforward. The morning after the board meeting, Jasmine had surprised everyone by declining the interim CEO position. Taking over the top position would send the wrong message, she had explained to the bewildered board members. "This isn't about replacing one leader with another. It's about fundamentally changing how leadership functions within Skyline." Instead, Jasmine had proposed a radical restructuring, the creation of an ethics and inclusion council with real power to implement and enforce policies. The council would include representatives from all levels of the company, from frontline workers to executives, and would report directly to the board. Most surprisingly, she had recommended Amara Johnson to head the council and lead a new customer experience division with authority to overhaul training and service standards. "Ms. Johnson has demonstrated exceptional courage and commitment to Skyline's improvement," Jasmine had argued. "She understands both the customer and employee experience intimately, and she's already proven she'll stand up for what's right regardless of personal risk." The board had been skeptical initially, but Jasmine's leverage as the largest individual shareholder had given her proposal serious weight. A compromise was reached, the council would be established for a 1-year trial period, with performance metrics clearly defined. The first months had been challenging. Clayton Williams had not departed quietly, filing lawsuits against both Jasmine personally and Skyline's board. The legal battles generated negative publicity, and Skyline's stock price suffered further before beginning a slow recovery. Some employees resistant to change had left, while others embraced the new direction with enthusiasm. Amara had proven herself an exceptional leader, bringing perspectives that had previously been ignored or marginalized. The most significant changes came in three areas: hiring practices, training protocols, and accountability systems. The company implemented blind resume reviews to reduce bias in hiring, launched comprehensive anti-discrimination training for all staff, and created multiple channels for reporting concerns without fear of retaliation. The Ethics and Inclusion Council reviewed every settled discrimination complaint from the past 5 years, reaching out to affected customers and employees with genuine apologies and, in many cases, compensation. Most importantly, the bonus structure that had incentivized discriminatory treatment was completely dismantled and replaced with metrics that rewarded excellent service for all passengers. Now, 6 months later, the results were beginning to show. Customer satisfaction scores had initially dropped as the company worked through its transformation, but they had rebounded strongly in the past 2 months. Employee retention had improved, and applications from diverse candidates had increased by 68%. As Jasmine concluded her presentation, she introduced Amara Johnson, who had become the public face of Skyline's transformation. "What we're building here isn't just a better airline," Amara told the gathered employees. "It's a model for how companies can acknowledge their failures and use them as stepping stones to create something genuinely inclusive." After the workshop, Jasmine checked her watch. Her flight back to San Francisco was departing in 2 hours, a Skyline flight, of course. She had made a point of continuing to fly with the airline, experiencing its evolution firsthand. As she walked through the terminal toward her gate, she noticed the changes both subtle and obvious. The staff was visibly more diverse at all levels. The premium service areas featured signage in multiple languages. Most tellingly, the security screening process had been redesigned to reduce the potential for bias. At the gate, Jasmine approached the podium to check in. The agent, a young man named Michael, greeted her with genuine warmth. "Ms. Taylor, welcome back to Skyline. We have you in seat 1A today. Boarding will begin in about 20 minutes. No questions about whether she belonged in first class. No suspicious glances at her documentation. Just professional courtesy extended equally to all passengers, exactly as it should be." As Jasmine took a seat in the waiting area, she opened her tablet to check on Taylor Tech's latest projects. Her company had thrived during her 6-month partial absence, a testament to the strong team she'd built. The experience with Skyline had reinforced her belief in the importance of creating systems that didn't depend on any single leader. When boarding began, Jasmine entered the aircraft and was greeted by a flight attendant who showed no surprise at her presence in first class. As she settled into her seat, she reflected on how a single day's journey had catalyzed such significant change. It hadn't been her initial plan to become so deeply involved in transforming Skyline. Plan Delta had originally been conceived as a way to extricate Taylor Tech from problematic investments. But witnessing the systematic discrimination firsthand had changed her calculus entirely. Sometimes the most powerful gesture wasn't walking away, but staying to ensure change happened. The seat beside her remained empty until the last moment, when a familiar face appeared, Howard Reynolds, the passenger who had spoken up for her 6 months ago. "Ms. Taylor," he said with a smile of recognition. "What a pleasant surprise. Mr. Reynolds. It's good to see you again. I've been following Skyline's transformation," he said as he stowed his briefcase. "Quite remarkable what you've accomplished." Jasmine shook her head. "What we've accomplished. Change requires allies willing to speak up, like you did." The flight proceeded smoothly, the service impeccable and equal for all passengers. As they began their descent into San Francisco, Howard turned to her. "You know, I fly constantly for business. I've seen companies make superficial changes when they get bad press. This feels different." "It is different," Jasmine confirmed. "Because it wasn't imposed from the top down. The people who experience the problems are the ones designing the solutions." After landing, Jasmine exited the aircraft and walked through the terminal, observing the subtle differences in Skyline's San Francisco operation. The company still had work to do, but the foundation for lasting change had been laid. Her phone buzzed with a message from Darius, CNN business segment about Skyline's turnaround airing tonight. They're calling it the Taylor Effect, highlighting how investor activism can drive social change. Jasmine smiled. The media had consistently misunderstood what had happened, framing it as a power play by a savvy investor. They missed the real story. How a collective of employees at all levels, backed by a shareholder who valued ethics over easy profits, had transformed the company from within. As she left the airport, Jasmine reflected on how a simple decision, refusing to accept discriminatory treatment and demanding accountability, had cascaded into industry-wide discussions about inclusion and equity. Other airlines had begun examining their own practices, nervous about facing similar scrutiny. The true power hadn't been in her wealth or position. It had been in her refusal to accept the status quo, and in her recognition that real change comes not from replacing one leader with another, but from empowering those who have been silenced to find their voice. Sometimes the most powerful gesture is the simplest one, standing firm in your dignity and refusing to be diminished, even when everyone expects you to back down. What would you do if faced with discrimination like Jasmine experienced? Would you walk away, or stay and fight for change? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might find it meaningful. Your support helps us continue sharing these important stories that need to be told. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the quietest gestures create the loudest changes. Jasmine Taylor's story teaches us that true change doesn't always come from walking away or making grand gestures. Sometimes, the most powerful act is staying engaged and fighting systemic problems from within. When faced with discrimination, Jasmine could have simply sold her shares and denounced the airline publicly. Instead, she chose the harder path, using her position to create structural change that benefited everyone. The story reminds us that power comes in many forms. While wealth and position granted Jasmine access, her real strength came from her integrity, strategic thinking, and willingness to empower others rather than seize control herself. By elevating Amara Johnson and creating an inclusive council with real authority, she ensured that those who understood the problems firsthand would design the solutions. Perhaps most importantly, this story shows us that discrimination isn't always addressed by simply replacing individuals. Real transformation requires examining and rebuilding the systems that enable bias to flourish. The policies, incentives, and cultural norms that shaped Skyline's behavior needed comprehensive reform, not just new leadership. Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination while traveling? How did you respond? Share your stories in the comments below. If you found value in Jasmine's approach to creating change from within, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about courageous individuals challenging the status quo. Would you have handled the situation differently? Let us know. Thank you for listening to this journey of resilience and transformation. May we all find the courage to stand firm in our dignity when faced with injustice, and the wisdom to create change that lifts everyone.